Hey, what's up everybody? Anthony Sevens here with my son Tony, and today we're going to be talking about video games and our personal history of video games, as well as being introduced to the Arcade 1-Up community and all of the devices and things like that. So let's rock and roll.
Ignition sequence starts. 6,
All right, welcome back. All right, so this is my son Tony. How you doing today?
Pretty good. How about you?
Living the dream. I'm partially awake, trying to wake up. But anyway, so with the resurgence of the arcade community these days through a company called Arcade 1-Up, who has delivered us some impressive and sometimes not impressive, but mostly impressive types of units that we can put into our homes, so we who grew up in the 80s and 90s can just enjoy arcades and video gaming the way that we grew up, the way that it was really, really fun for us. Now, me personally, growing up in the 80s and 90s, I had every kind of home gaming console you can think of, from the original Atari to the original Nintendo Entertainment System, and then into the 90s with Sega Genesis, PlayStation, Xbox, Super Nintendo, blah, blah, so on and so forth. But then in 2018, 2019, Arcade 1-Up came out with these at-home versions of arcade machines, and it really flipped the script and took things back to, back in the 80s and some of the games, of course, into the 90s. And it just was this fantastic feeling of being able to relive my childhood again, and on a multi-generational format. I was actually able to not only tell my kids stories about back in the days when we were playing arcade games, if we can show them physically this is the way we used to play video games when I was your age. So I think it's very fantastic through an aspect like that. So tell us about your gaming experience growing up.
Well, I very vividly remember playing the first Xbox, the one that was purely cord.
Yeah, that was the very first Xbox, and that's around the time you were born is when we got the Xbox in the house. So that's what you kind of grew up with.
I remember the only game that I can remember ever playing on the Xbox was Rampage.
Yeah, we had that.
Because there was all of these old games that were combined into this one sort of, I guess, disc, I don't know. Yeah,
it was the greatest hits of, I think, Midway or Williams or something like that. But yeah, that was really the only way, before the Arcade 1-Up came out, that was the only way that even people of my age could relive those games, right, unless you were making tall-ass cash and actually buying real arcade machines to add into your home, which we could not. We didn't have tons of money or anything. So reliving our childhood up until 2018, 2019 was purely just either buying discs for the Xbox that were classic arcade games, or even with Xbox 360 and Xbox Live, you were able to download some of those classic games. But it was never the same. It really was never the same, because playing on an Xbox controller is way different than standing in front of a beautiful cabinet with big joystick and big buttons and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, I definitely realized the big difference when you're playing with console games versus the arcade games. The arcade games are just more simpler. You don't have to worry about turning them on, or you can just keep them on if you want. Not going to waste too much power. And it's just get up and down, with Xbox and PlayStation.
Yeah, it very was a complex turn of things. Because, when we had Atari growing up, it was just a joystick and one button. And then the games evolved, with Nintendo per se, where you had a multi-directional pad, a start select button, and an A-B button. And then the control pads for gaming consoles just got more and more and more advanced as time went on. And instead of you know, you think about an arcade where your hands are like this. You know, you have a flat console with joystick buttons, and it was much easier to do this than it was to have everything compressed and you're trying to coordinate your hands. So it was a very weird transition even for us, but a natural one too, because we were young and we had both the arcades available to us as well as the home gaming systems. But you know, in all honesty, I can't speak for everybody that's my age. I mean, I'm 44 now, but there really was, like, I never really liked sitting down and playing games on a couch. Like, sitting down and playing games, it made me lazy, it made me lethargic, it made me just want to stay home all the time and play. Whereas going to arcades, whether it was an arcade or a laundromat or a bowling alley that had arcades, I loved that. My friends, we used to call each other up and be like, hey, let's go meet at the arcade, or let's go meet at the bowling alley. So playing real arcade games was something that we had to go out to do at that point in time. And I really loved that, because playing in an arcade, playing arcade games was like a social event between my friends and I, and then you get to meet other fans and other people there. But nowadays, again, you know, to bring that experience home is just, it's so incredible. And I never thought in a gazillion years that I'd be able to have these systems in my house, let alone share them with my children to again, physically show this is what we did when we were young. And it's such a cool thing. So what's of all of the arcade 1-up games that you have played so far, what do you think are some of your favorite games?
So hands down, the Star Wars cabinet.
Yeah, Star Wars, yep.
You know, it's super fun, and I like, out of the 3 ones that you can choose from, I prefer A New Hope, the first one, and it's just, it requires a lot of, you know, you have to be quick, you have to be precise, and you know, it's very fast paced, and I like that. You know, it's just super simple, and you know, it's super easy to learn how to do it too. And then Mortal Kombat has got to be the second one.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, I was playing that a little yesterday, and you know, it's just 2-3 controls for each character. You know, just the joystick, and you got 4 buttons, and it's a lot more. I prefer playing it in the cabinet more than on the Xbox.
Yeah, it was because by the time you were born, I want to say there was 4 Mortal Kombat games that were out, and I think at that time the only way you could play them at home was via Xbox and PlayStation, I think, because I had the very first like PS1 PlayStation, and I had Mortal Kombat 4 for that, so I do remember that was the last one that had come out around the time you were born. But yeah, again, growing up, and for many, many years not having arcade machines available, we were reliving the classic Mortal Kombat games on an Xbox. It's like, this is MK2, and it's hard to explain the full experience of what Mortal Kombat was, you know, just by putting a disc in a machine and picking up a controller. Because in the arcade, it really was a whole experience. It wasn't just like, here's a video game, put it in a machine, and now you have the game on the TV. You know, to actually have physical, like the controls and the cabinet and the artwork on the side. I mean, I remember when Mortal Kombat first came out in 1992, I was a freshman in high school. So imagine, you know, nothing like Mortal Kombat has come out at this point in time, right? And the first time I played it was at the world's largest laundromat in Berwyn. And walking into that arcade, never in my life had I ever seen a line for an arcade before. There was a line of like 15 people, and it's like, holy shit, you know, like what's all this hustle and bustle? And then you get to the cabinet, and it's almost like this majestic, like, wow, this cabinet is beautiful, the controls are great, and the characters, and to see like real digitized actors, and the first fighting game to really have violence and blood and fatalities and all this other stuff. I mean, it was a sight to behold, loud and booming, and it wasn't sitting at home on a couch with a little controller with your TV, and that was really the beauty of, you know, the arcade experience of it all. So I don't know, like like from a multi-generational point of view, like being younger, compared to home video gaming and Xboxes and PlayStations and stuff, how would you say, which device is better in each way? Like the good things about home gaming consoles, the good things about the arcade machines, and maybe even the bad things, if there are any to you.
Well, one thing that I always have to keep in mind is that, consoles will always have more selection of games, and that's what I love about the home console games. It's because there's just more of a variety of what you can do. But on certain consoles, you can have old games like, you could have the original Mortal Kombat. It looks the same as what it did on the arcade, but it obviously does not play the same, but it looks the same.
No, it plays the same, but it's not the same experience. Right. It's different. Like, I even remember when Mortal Kombat came to the home systems for the first time. The only two ways you could play Mortal Kombat was you either went to the arcades and popped quarters in, or you can buy or rent the games from a video store, or buy it from a video game store. But then playing for so long on an arcade machine, and then having to switch over to, like, say, a 6-button Genesis controller, or even as complex as the Super Nintendo controller was. You had 2 buttons on top, 4 buttons, start, select, and relearning. You had to relearn and retrain yourself to do all of these different things and the fatalities. I mean, eventually it became super easy to do, but it wasn't the same experience. And even though we had the home gaming console versions, we still wanted to go to the arcade and play it, because it was just a more booming experience. So,
and with the arcades, they're just super simple, and it's just, like I said, get up and go, and that's what I really like about it. There's no preparation. You could just go wherever they are and start playing. Just one press of a button and you start the game. And with the home gaming consoles, it's a whole boot up process. You have to, try to find what game you want to play, which it's not a bad thing trying to find which game you want to play, but, it's not as simple and easy to maneuver as arcade games are.
And I wouldn't say arcade games are easy per se, because there are tons of challenging games. Even being 44, I have trouble passing level 5 or 6 on Star Wars, all of these years later. And that's an arcade game that came out when I was like 5 years old. So it was definitely one of those things where, I look at the arcade cabinet and I'm like, I can't wait to play that. I remember I loved playing that in the arcade. And then you get it home and you start playing and you're like, fuck, I'm not as good as I thought I was. It's not as simple and as easy as I thought. But I hear what you're saying. Like, when it comes to game consoles, there is a far more superior selection of games as opposed to what's released to the general public these days. And I'm not talking about people who have arcade machines that bootleg 1,000 different arcade games to put in their machine. I'm just saying what's normally available to the general public as far as our selection. I think Arcade 1-Up at this point in time, believe it or not, has like 40 something units out right now, and 2, 3, 4 games, sometimes 8 or 10 games per unit. So collectively, like, we have in my place here, we have a total of 8 machines, and I think we have a collective of 48 different games that we can play. And you think about 48 arcade cabinets, that's a lot of cabinets, so that's a lot of games to have just between 8 units. So but with the home gaming consoles, everything is easier, I think, because say if there's a game that you do want that you don't own. I mean, nowadays you can go on Xbox Live and just purchase it right there on your TV. But I don't know, like I said, I think the main difference for me is just the overall experience of it all. You sit in a chair with a controller and stare at your TV for hours, or you actually get up and you can move around. And the great thing that I personally love about arcade games is, to a point like you were saying, where they're simplified. It's not like a World Quest game that you have to sit there for 7 hours to get through a level or play or find these mysteries. Usually arcade games are formatted they want to take more of your money and more quarters. So it is easier to die in a lot of games. But once you die, you know, I remember being in arcades and even here at the home systems, once you die, you can step away from the machine and go play something else. Like, okay, I lost, my turn's over, or I'm gonna go play that game, or I'm gonna go play that game. And you can bounce around to 50 different games in an hour's worth of time when you're at an arcade or if you have enough machines at home. So, you know, I really like that there's like an ending to the games, and it could be immediate if you suck. Right. So, and you're not stapled to your couch like, say, a Batman Arkham game, which are awesome games. The Batman Arkham series is amazing, but when I play those games, I feel like it just consumes so much time. Where if I get really bored, I'm like, I'm gonna go in the basement and play Mortal Kombat and rip somebody's head off, and I've got my fix for the day. I'm cool, and I can move on with that. So,
yeah, I really like the open world games where you're the deep exploration. You know, like Jedi Fallen Order, Batman Arkham games, all of those games.
You guys are great.
Where you have like a really solid story, but then after the story you can go explore, unlock more secrets and everything like that. I do widely enjoy those types of games, and I do spend my time playing those games most.
Yeah.
But I do own some fighting games like Mortal Kombat, Killer Instinct, and stuff like that I can play on my Xbox. And sometimes when I'm bored, I'll just play like maybe 15-20 minutes of Mortal Kombat or whatever I want to play, and I'll be good. Because even today you have Mortal Kombat on the gaming consoles, and you could do a quick single fight, one and done, and you can just go off.
Yeah.
And with Killer Instinct, the same thing.
Right. Yeah, that was the beauty of classic fighting games back in the days. There was no missions. Like, a lot of the modern Mortal Kombat games, you can have your simple one-on-one fights, but now they have story mode and unlock 5,000 different costumes and items and things. Whereas, arcades, they had their mysteries to it. Like, I remember when the first Mortal Kombat came out, like, the one thing was, there's rumors of this reptile character. Like, everyone's like, oh, did you see Reptile? He fell from the sky, and there's a certain secret way to get to him. So, here we were just dumping our allowance in these machines, sometimes just trying to find Reptile, not even beat the game. We just wanted to see it and have bragging rights. Like, yo, I made it to Reptile. People, look, take a picture. It's kind of fun like that. But, so do you say that, like, say arcades in general, like arcade 1-up style stuff, the home game, do you prefer the gaming consoles over the arcade machines, or do you think that if you own like say, because I guess technically what's mine is all of your guys's too. I'm not stingy or anything. Like between the arcade machines and home gaming consoles, what do you prefer the most as being a younger person? So
just because I grew up on it, I definitely would prefer the home gaming, but it's not something like, oh, I like them a whole lot more than the arcade machines. Like, if I didn't have a home gaming system and I had to solely just play arcade games, I wouldn't be complaining. But even down here, you got the Xbox and you got the arcade machines, and I usually just play the arcade machines because.
So like your thoughts on it pretty much is, fuck it, it's video games, and video games are awesome no matter what form they're in, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay.
No matter what form they're in, there's always a way to kind of escape from reality for a little bit.
Oh, for sure. And that was the beauty of it, and I think that was the big attractor for us in the 80s and 90s with arcades. A lot of us, home was boring as shit. We didn't have all the fancy tech that we have today that we can actually stay home and build our own at-home arcades. We didn't have that option back then. So home was boring, our parents were driving us nuts. So it's like, we almost felt like if we wanted to have a good time, we had to go out and we had to get to an arcade and meet up with our friends, or even just by ourselves. And just, they really were an escape. Like, we needed that digital vice to escape from stupid, boring, sometimes frustrating, and pissing us off reality.
Right.
So that's cool. But yeah, for me personally, if I had to choose between arcade versus console, Granted, for all of these years before the arcade games, obviously, I've owned all the different consoles, and I did play on home consoles, and there was, hundreds of games that I loved playing. But I honestly find that once Arcade 1-Up invented these machines for us for at home, I play my arcade games 95% of the time, and the home gaming stuff maybe 5%. Like in a month's worth of time, I think maybe there's one day that I'll play the gaming console. Like, to the point, if someone said, hey Tony, you got to get rid of your $500 gaming console, I wouldn't mind, because I barely ever use it since the arcade games. Because not only do I play them constantly, but they're beautiful decor in one's home. And for those of you who own Arcade 1-Up machines, especially a whole plethora of them, it's not the fact that you need to play them all the time, it's just the fact of having them, and it builds atmosphere, sound and light and stuff like that. That is another amazing thing for us too. It's like, it's total nostalgia, and a lot of people my age, I can't speak for everybody, we thrive on nostalgia like that. And for you guys, for the younger generation, it's not nostalgia. It's just like some cool retro shit that my parents played. So to a point, I can see where you don't care, and it's like, us parents are going, isn't this great and exciting? And Dad, I don't care. It's cool, but it doesn't matter as much as it does to you. And I think that that's a really honest opinion. Can you agree with that statement, or am I just throwing words in your mouth?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can agree with that. So, and I think that most of you guys who are parents can relate to that too. We spend all this money, hoping to relive our childhood and give our kids something amazing, and to many extents, it is something amazing for our children to enjoy, but at the same time, they'll never care about it as much as we do, because we're not just buying arcade machines, we're reliving an entire portion of our youth. So, and if it's not their youth that they're reliving, then they seem to care less about it. But anyways, that's all the time we got for today. I gotta finish doing laundry and shit like that, and Tony's gotta head out of here. Thank you, son, for joining me today. It was a great pleasure to have you. Any last words you want to say to the people out here?
Stay safe, take care of yourselves, and that's all I got.
Okay, and as always, I always like to say, take care of yourself, take care of each other. Thanks for joining me, and see you next time.